Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. My name is Miasma, and tonight we're going to be doing an anime review for the 2018 film Flavors of Youth. Now, you can check this out on Netflix. It just came out on there, I believe, in August. Um, and it is, I think the most interesting aspect of this has nothing to do with like the story itself. It is the production. So this production was partially done by Comics Wave, which is a Japanese studio notable for works like Your Name, 5 centimeters per second, and other Makoto Shinkai films. If you know this channel, you know I'm a big Shinkai fan myself. And this is my favorite animation studio, but it wasn't just them working on this. This was also done by, I believe it's, I might be pronouncing it wrong. I believe it's Howliners Animation League in China. And first of all, that's really cool. I really like when other nations kind of showcase their animation abilities and just kind of emulate Japanese anime and stuff like that. I love it in American shows like Ruby and Avatar and stuff like that. And it's just interesting to see different animation techniques from throughout the world. And now, Flavors of Youth takes place in China. It is an anthology story, 3 separate stories that all deal with passion and love and dealing with sort of the people around you in life in different regards. Like I don't want to spoil too much because the movie's only like an hour long. But it's so the first story is basically about this guy who is kind of from like the sticks, and he has fond memories of going to a noodle shop with his grandmother growing up. And it was this like really nice noodle shop that they had in town, and he sort of just through flashbacks tells how he grew up with this noodle shop, how he loved the smell of the noodles, the animation for the noodles, and for this movie in general is beautiful. You get a lot of cool shots of them like cooking and like cutting up vegetables and them with like the noodles and like the pan and stuff like that. And he does a great job at like describing what it is about the food that he likes. He talks about like the sensation, the taste, the smell, just the nostalgia that he feels for these meals. Like it almost felt like I was like hanging out with like a real person, and like I could totally get someone talking about having an awesome meal back in the day at a particular restaurant that they grew up by. And this felt very real, and I liked his connection with his grandmother. I wish they went into it a little more, but we'll get into that later. And yeah, so that the first story deals with the world changing around you, and how stuff when you're a kid is not going to be the same forever. And that's true with people, and that's true with businesses, that's true with communities, and it really kind of highlights that fact of life, that things are going to change. The second story is about this girl who's a model, a woman who's a model, living in the city. I'm not sure if it's Beijing, but I think it's Beijing, a major city in China, at least. And she was always tall growing up, and because of her height, she got into modeling. And she used to look at being tall as like being like a weirdo, like amongst her classmates and stuff like that. But then she slowly sort of started to embrace it and use it to her benefit, and she became a model. She's been a successful model for a couple years now. She's starting to get on towards the like what she refers to as like her latter years of being a popular model. In her eyes, that people are only in the spotlight for so long, she's gonna fall out of it, and she sees this as this like inevitable thing that's going to happen. So it's kind of a bummer, but it's kind of probably like a true thing. I don't know a lot about the modeling world, but I feel like not all of them, most of them aren't in the business forever. And she lives with her younger sister, who doesn't really look a lot like her, but is incredibly supportive of her. These two have a very close sibling bond, and it talks about their upbringing a little bit, and how they weren't living together for a portion of their life, but now are very close, living together and supporting one another. And one would think that the older sister, the model sister, the one whose apartment that they live in and is really, the breadwinner, would be the rock of the family, but it's actually the younger sister, and I found her to be a really cool character, and I thought that was a cool family dynamic. They both rely on each other, and I think that the older sibling actually relies on the younger sibling more than she would even admit at first. And yeah, that showcases their relationship. And then the third story is this is in Shanghai, and it's a lot of flashback of this guy who grew up in this like sort of I don't remember it's a name for it's like a sort of ghetto-y type neighborhood. There's a term that they keep using, and I should have wrote it down, but I did not. A lot of like houses really close together, on top of one another, or stuff like that. But at the same time, a very tight community. People that, while you were in everybody's business, people respected one another. People that were there for one another. People weren't alien to one another. And contrast that with like life in the city, it's very different. And this guy's life has taken him, from that to, trying to get into a big university. And he has two friends from his childhood. He has this like chubby, funny dude who's always there for him, but he's kind of just like the comedy appeal of the story, I guess, for like a side character. And then he also has a love interest, a girl that he grew up with in his hometown, who didn't have the best family situation and was really trying to get into one of the big universities, which was a daunting challenge. And once he finds that out, he was not a great student in his youth. Once he found out that his friend that he liked was trying to get into the big university, which is actually far away from where they live, he dedicated himself to getting better grades, to studying more, to putting all the focus that he had on kind of wandering through life, as he puts it, into studying, into making himself a smarter person, into making himself, as he sees it, better suited to be with the girl that he loves. And that's all I'm going to say. That I don't want to spoil anything that goes on with that. Again, pretty short movie. It's available in sub and the dub. I watched the dub. It was perfectly fine. I liked the voices that they used. It's a comics wave kind of thing, so it's not directed by Makoto Shinkai. If you were wondering, it's directed by someone else from the same studio. But there's a lot of feels here. There's a lot of sentimentality. If that's not your thing, you might not like this. If there's stuff I did not like, I don't think it's the best written thing out there. It's primarily because I think it's the problem with it being an anthology, and this is another reason why this kind of thing usually isn't my cup of tea. I'm not an anthology guy. I kind of would have preferred this as like 3 separate films, like 3, like, if each part was an hour long, like it was just a series of movies, I think it would be far better. Because it sort of rushes you through a lot of these, especially the first story, where I mentioned the boy and his grandmother. I think that while the relationship was touching, and you could tell that she was impactful on his life, I feel like we should have gotten more of her. Like, we get a lot of him, and I get it, it's from his perspective, but the big point of this is that he liked spending, he's reminiscing on his youth, and she's a big individual in his youth. She was a big individual in his youth, so I feel like she should have gotten more screen time. The same with the second story, is I feel like that the younger sister should have gotten more screen time. I feel like the main characters in these stories, for the most part, with the exception to the third didn't really do this that much. The first 2 stories of this anthology really focus too much on the main character. And I know that's probably a weird thing to complain about, but for me, it got in the way of the sentimentality, which is what this movie is supposed to be all about. Again, has a beautiful aesthetic, has a good dub, awesome animation, good music, and it was a joy to watch. It was definitely worth the time. I definitely recommend that you guys try streaming Flavors of Youth on Netflix if you can. And if you have seen it, let me know down below what you thought. Do you agree with me that you kind of would rather see it just as like separate movies? I think that would have been a little better, or maybe even like I could see this as being like maybe like 3 like 40-minute OVAs or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm crazy. If I'm crazy, let me know down below. I do have a Patreon now. I'm going to link that down below in the description. Thank you to Nia-chan for being my official first patron. Wow. You're my very first patron, Nia. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is Miasma signing out.